This is the Cash Car Convert Podcast, Episode 2. My name is James Kinson, and I'm your host for this podcast. On today's episode, we have with us Pat Flynn from Smart Passive Income. I want to give our listeners a little warning. The audio quality on my end of the recording turned out not to be so good. So I had somebody do some professional editing on it and do what they could to save the audio. It's still not great, so I wanted to give you a warning. But Pat brings such great content and information that it's a really wonderful episode. So my apologies for the audio issues, but I believe you'll enjoy this one. So with that, let's get started.
You're listening to the Cash Car Convert Podcast with James Kinson.
Hello and welcome to the Cash Car Convert Podcast. I'm James Kinson, your host. Today we have with us Pat Flynn. Pat is a blogger at Smart Passive Income. He's also a podcaster, a speaker, and a best-selling author of the book Let Go. This is a book I highly recommend. He's also created a course called Breakthrough Blogging, and I know he's gotten a lot of good reviews with that as well. And with that, Pat, I'd like to welcome you to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, James. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I know you've done a lot of interviews about building your business and the history of how you were laid off and some of those things, but I want to approach this from a bit of a different perspective, and I think as we go through, I want to talk more about the mindset of where you were financially and how you were going through those difficult times and some of the choices that you made there. So with that, I always like to start off the interviews by asking my guests what their first car was and how it worked out for them. So with that, tell me a little bit about your first car.
Sure. Well, my very first car, which I won't talk much about because it was actually given to me from my dad, who had saved up for quite a bit to, by the time I was 16, he would have this car. So, I mean, in that respect, he did a great job because he just has been he knew that he wanted to give me a car when I was going to turn 16 and get my license if I was a good boy, and I guess I was. And so I turned 16 and he had enough cash to just throw down for a car for me. It was a 1996 Toyota Tacoma, and it was awesome. I loved it. It was perfect. It was a nice little two-seater, and it was really all I needed. But my next car was actually purchased. This was in 2009, and it was purchased after I, got married to my wife, and she had an older, I think it was even a 1996 Honda Civic, and I had the Tacoma, and we had gotten pregnant, and we knew that we needed a car that was good for the family, that was easy to get into, and could have a car seat. My truck couldn't have a car seat. Hers could, but it would be a squeeze in the back. It was only a two-door. So we wanted to be smart about, what would help us take the baby around and, to be able to put the baby in and easily take out. And so, we had obviously a lot of options. There was obviously the minivan option and things like that, but we didn't need to go that big. And, my wife and I had always talked about how, I actually had my own business at this time. It just started, and I had gone through a layoff not too far before that, and so money was always a big issue for us as far as making sure we were smart about what we were spending. Because even though I had this job and I thought it was secure, it wasn't. I was laid off in 2008, even though I was getting promoted and climbing the corporate ladder. Just the economy in 2008, I wasn't able to continue with my job. So of course, money was always a big issue for us, and wanting to be smart with it, wanting to save it, but spend it where we needed to spend it. So we knew we needed to buy this new car. And we actually ended up trading in her old car to get that. So that saved a little bit of money up front too. But then we paid for a 2004, a used 2004. Again, this is 2009. Yep. We paid for a used 2004 Honda CRV. It was perfect. A little bit bigger car than we had, but 4-seater. We can open the doors, easy for putting stuff in the back, like the stroller and all the anything we would need with the baby, and of course the car seat there too. So it was practical. It was everything we needed. Wasn't anything above what we needed or anything extravagant. Right. And we paid. I think it was maybe $11,000 for that. We put $5,000 down, which we had. I had saved up that money, again, ahead of time, planning ahead, knowing that we were going to pay it off. And then luckily business took off after that, and I just ended up paying it off altogether so that we were not in debt anymore and
right.
weren't indebted to that. And so that was the first sort of car that I feel like it was the first car that was really mine because that, we purchased it together.
Got it. Perfect. With that, I'd kind of like to go back to the time when you were working as an architect, and at the time you went from a senior draftsman to a job captain, and this is after you'd passed the lead exam, and your income went from roughly $38K to about $60K. And I wanted to understand, how did that change your mind shift, and how did you handle your money differently at that point? I know a lot of people would run out and buy a new car, and obviously you didn't do that. So at that point, you didn't know that your job was going to be in jeopardy soon, I don't think. So I'd just like to, kind of get a feeling for that.
Sure. I mean, mentally, I knew that I was going to have more money coming in, and certain decisions were made quicker because of that. And it wasn't buying a new car. It was actually proposing to my wife, because I knew we would be able to start a family together, which made the whole layoff thing that happened just several months later even more devastating. Just the whole timing was crazy. But anyway, when I had gotten promoted, that's a significant increase in income. And again, I was with my girlfriend at the time, and we're not extravagant people. I mean, I know a lot of people who, when they get more money, they spend more money. But for me, I've been a Dave Ramsey follower for a while, and I've read all the, frugality blogs. Personal finance was big for me, and my goal was to always pay myself first in terms of saving and investing before buying things that I may not necessarily need. And so I was always, when I had that increase in income, I actually was spending more money, but it was on myself. I was saving more money, investing more money. So, that's when, more money started coming. So I hired like a CPA to help me figure out how to allocate it and things like that, and better take care of this influx of money that I had that I didn't have before. So yeah, I there was no need to buy a new car, really. I mean, there was no need to do it. So, I'm not a person to try and, up my status. I know a lot of people buy cars because they want to show off to their friends that they have all this money, but that's not the kind of person I am. And I know that gets a lot of people into trouble sometimes. It does. And it sounds like it's a real blessing that you didn't go do something like go buy a new car with that, because that obviously, like as you said, the layoff came very shortly thereafter. Yeah, absolutely. It was also great that my wife, or my girlfriend at the time, understood that too, and she was the same way. That's, I think, what attracted me to her. She's very practical, like myself, in that sense, when it comes to money. And money for me, historically, when I was a kid, that was something that both my parents sort of struggled with, and they would fight about. All parents fight, and typically the topic of conversation in my family was money. And so I was always very sensitive to that, and I think that sort of played a role in how I treated money in the future. Okay, that's great, because I was going to ask that where that came from, because so many people, they learn that your income is, whatever your income grows to, that's what your spending will grow to. And it's obviously you had a different mindset, so that's really great. And I still hear half divorces happen now because of money. So yeah, it's scary. I applaud you on that 100%. Thank you. And it sounds like you were at least in the position of planning to get well positioned financially when you were laid off. So tell me a little bit about that. Did you have a lot of cash reserves? Or not when you... Yeah, I mean, I did. I had an emergency fund where at the time it was like 2-3 months spending, or 3 months of income at the old income rate that I had. So when the new income came in, that was great. I was able to, I had the emergency fund already, so I can then invest in brokerage accounts and things like that, mutual funds and long-term retirement allocations. And it also, ever since I started working in the architecture field, I would put away, $100 every month. I took that out of my paycheck immediately after I got it, and I would just put it into sharebuilder.com. And that was just sort of my way of being able to, experiment and understand the market a little bit better, because I knew I was going to be investing a lot in other things through my broker and through mutual funds and stuff. It gave me an opportunity to really, be on the front lines of, okay, this is how the market works and things like that. And of course, the timing was always for long term. I wasn't planning on taking, I'm not, doing short sales or not doing short trading or anything like that, or day trading. It's these long-term things. So I've just been, dollar cost averaging every single month, putting into stocks that I, would do research on and try to understand. And that's, I read more personal finance blogs, some with a more, investor sort of, motif, I guess you could say. And so just to try to understand that. So for every month for the last 5 years now, I mean, recently I've been able to put more into those types of accounts, but I have now, ever since, just starting way early, and not even really feeling the effect of putting this money in there, because it's just something that I knew that I was going to do anyway. I have about $70,000 or $80,000 now in the stock market just from over time and investing in myself. And so I'm really fortunate to have that in addition to the emergency fund that I have now and being able to invest. And of course, business has done really well. So I've been able to take that to the next level recently too.
The other thing I wanted to touch on is I know when you were laid off that you made the decision to move back home. And again, I thought that was a really fiscally smart decision to make. That puts you in a 2-hour commute each way. And I think about that in terms of what I think most people would do. And I don't think most people would do that. So I wanted you to share with us kind of your mindset around that and how you arrived at that decision.
It's just very mathematical, really. I mean, we were living in Irvine. Irvine is not the cheapest place in the world to live, but, it was right there next to my architecture office. And then when I got laid off, I knew that money was not going to be coming in for a while, and it just made sense to save that $700 a month I was paying for just a room, and then my wife also paying around $500 a month. It made sense for us to just save that money and move back home and have me spend $200 a month on traveling. On the train for a pass that I could use every day to go back up. So, and for those of you listening who don't know the story, I got laid off, but I had about a 3-month buffer period before I was officially laid off between when I was told I was going to be laid off, because I was a job captain and I was in charge of certain projects and I couldn't just leave that day. I had to sort of close up those projects and hand them off to people who were higher up, who would understand them more, who weren't involved in those projects like I was. And so what that did was it allowed me to go back home with my parents. And I was very fortunate that they lived somewhat close away. I mean, it was an 1.5-hour train ride each day to and from, so about 3 hours total. But that's really when amazing things started to happen, because not only did I live at home and save money, and, I was, in addition to the rent that I was saving, they were good with doing my laundry, and, food was there sometimes, and, that sort of thing. So it saved even more than just the rent. But it allowed me to have this time on the train to really think. When you're in the car and you just are driving to wherever, you think a lot about, stuff. And so that gave me a lot of time to think, what are my next steps? What can I do? And it gave me an opportunity to discover a lot of these great podcasts that I listened to that eventually inspired me and taught me, what I do now, which is, online business. And, it gave me the confidence and focus and the energy to do that. And then it got to a point where, in the beginning, when I was taking the train every day, I was just like the worst thing in the world. Like every day I got on the train, I was like, like another day off that calendar closer to my official end date, all the way to, I can't wait to go on the train because I want to learn more about online business. I'm almost excited and scared, but still excited that I won't have to be doing this much longer.
The other piece I wanted to touch on here, and I think it's important for a lot of people, because I know a lot of people really respect what you've been able to accomplish in what seems like, to those who probably haven't lived through it, a very short period of time. And I think that the fiscal decisions that you've made along the way positioned you to be able to do this and take advantage of it. Again, you weren't in a position where you had a new car with a car payment or a ton of student loans or something that you had to pay. You didn't have a choice but to go find another job just to make those ends meet. Is that a fair assessment in your perspective?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have to give credit also to my dad for being smart financially and helping me understand what that really means. And back when he purchased my car, he already had that money. So he planned way ahead of time. When he actually helped pay for my college too. And so in that regard, he took a lot off of me, and I still had to pay for some of it, but not as much as one would normally have to if they just paid for it all themselves. So again, he was sort of leading the way and teaching me, which helped me understand that early up front I was going to eventually start a family, so I would have to start saving for that now. Other things like this emergency fund, that was there in case I needed to dip into it when I got laid off. And so it just made me feel really comfortable and be able to take these risks that I probably wouldn't have been able to take if I was on my last few dollars, if that makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's exactly right. And I think that's one of the things I want to be sure and get across to people here. There are people out there today who want to make that transition into more of an entrepreneurial role, and yet, they go out and they buy a new car or they take out another loan or something. And I want to encourage them to start to think about not just the fill in the bucket or getting a bigger shovel to make more money, but also about positioning themselves in such a way that they'll have an opportunity to take that step off into a new world.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of people ask me, what should I do if I want to get into this world of online business? I feel like I should just quit and put everything into it. And you could do that. And I was actually fortunate enough to be laid off. And I say that because I really didn't have a plan B, and I was forced to figure it out. But at the same time, a lot of people think that you have to do that and you have to quit and put it all into it. But the beauty of online business, specifically online business, is you can, over time, test things out. You can have your job, or if you don't have a job, you can find one that you can sort of mentally say, this is temporary, or this is something that actually is going to help me improve my skills so that I can then become an entrepreneur. There's a great book by Dan and Chip Heath. It's called Decisive that just came out. And he talks about how we always say it's either one or the other. And we never think that we can have both, but you can. And that's the beauty of, again, online business. You could test things. You could start out small. It doesn't cost very much at all. When I started online business, it just cost maybe $8 a month to have my web hosting and domain set up. And then it was about delivering value and delivering content for people who would then become fans, trust me, and then be able to pay me back on products and things that I sell to them in the future. But, all that to say, if you're in that position and, you can just try things out and give it a shot. And really the most important lesson there is nothing new is going to happen unless you make some changes.
The one thing that in your story that really kind of jumped out at me, and I know we haven't given a lot of history, so one of the things I want to do maybe here is at some point get a podcast episode that you've been on recently with somebody else that you really went through the history a lot. Certainly they can get the book Let Go, which I would recommend they do to get that history and background on you as well.
Sure. I would recommend maybe Entrepreneur on Fire episode 2. I was John's first interview in episode 2, and that goes through my background and story.
Perfect. Okay, I'll certainly link to that in the show notes then. I know one of the things that you really talk about having happened fortuitously is that you joined the Internet Business Mastery Academy, and I wanted to kind of understand. You put money into that program. A lot of people in your situation would have thought, I can't afford to do this. What gave you the courage to invest in yourself and in that academy?
Well, I just knew. There are a lot of people out there that say they have the answer, right? And you got to be careful because there's a lot of people out there who are just trying to, and they hire all the best people to make themselves look the best they can so that you can pull out your credit card, buy something, and it might be something that may or may not work, right? Now, these guys, Jeremy and Jason from Internet Business Mastery, I was listening to them for quite a long time, especially on those train rides. I trusted them. I got to know them, and I talked to them via email and Skype over time. They just gave so much away for free that I understood that they were in this for the right reasons. And so I was willing to invest in their program. And, it was only at the time $97 a month, and I figured, okay, $97 a month to see if this is something that would work. If not, then and they even had a money back guarantee. If it wasn't right, you can ask them for your money back, and they will honor that. But I was just like, okay, I'm going to test it out, see if this resonates with me, see if it works. And so those things allowed me to sort of explore this world and get to know these people even more. And also the best part about joining their thing was, and this is something that you may not even need to spend money to do at this point. Is I was able to connect with other people who had the same values. And there are places where you can go and find people, groups like on LinkedIn or groups on Facebook where you can connect with other people. And really, the information in that course was great. But really what I loved the most was the forum, where I could communicate with other people who were going through the same problems or who had gone through those same struggles that I had gone through, who were there to inspire me, but also guide me along the way. And there's a lot of people out there who will do that, just on forums out there that you can get on for free. But it was nice because I knew that if I pay this money, I would get that content and information to help me, walk me step by step through the process. But also there would be a community of people who also paid that much money to be in there and would also contribute, and we would all just help each other out. That's why in my book Let Go and anywhere I go and anywhere I talk about this thing and what sort of were the big things that helped me get to where I am today, it's the mastermind group and the fact that there were other people that helped me there along the way. And that doesn't mean you have to pay for help, but just finding other people who are there to that share the same values as you, that you can help them and they can help you. You can't do this alone. There's no way you can do it alone. If you ask any successful entrepreneur or any business owner, if you ask them they did it all by themselves, if they're honest with you, they would say no. There would be multiple people that would be in their story that helped them along the way.
So I want to go back more to the financial side again here for a second. And so when you were a job captain in your architectural role, you were making roughly $60K a year. And now you're in a position where you're making roughly that number in a month. And so I know that at least from the cars we've spoken about, that hasn't really changed your lifestyle much. So I wanted to kind of explore where your lifestyle has changed, where are
Sure.
you allocating those dollars?
Well, I am investing. I mean, I was investing before. I just happen to be investing more now and diversifying my portfolio a little bit more, because that's the best way to sort of be secure in all this, is just diversify. And so, the income level I'm at now has just allowed me to invest more, and it's mentally made me feel more comfortable. We haven't changed our lifestyle. We still rent right now, although we just purchased our first home very recently. That's probably going to be the biggest change of my whole life so far. So I'm really excited and interested about that. But, it's not an extravagant home. It's just we needed to expand because the family is expanding. And I think really the biggest lifestyle change was, if I didn't get laid off, I'd probably still be doing architecture. I'd probably be very happy, doing what I went to school for. But, if I started a family, I wouldn't be able to do what I love that I'm able to do now, which is to stay at home with my kids, witness all their firsts, and be there for them when, I need to be, or be there for my wife, or who has the hardest job in the world. She's a housewife. She's a stay-at-home mom. I can be here to support her too. And so I think that's really the biggest change. And, that is what the sort of lifestyle I have now is all about, and what the money has been able to allow me to do. Now, that's just me. That's what I want to do. That's my why. Your why, or your listeners' why, might be different. I mean, there are some people who make significant amount of money who do travel the world, or who do buy the mansions and the fancy cars. And if that's your why, then that's fine. But I think it's really important, before anything, to understand what your why is, or what your true daily routine, your ideal happiness life your ideal happy life. What would that be? And then you can sort of reverse engineer from there. Well, if you know that your goal is to earn this amount of money every year and to be able to spend time at home with the kids, then you can sort of reverse engineer a sort of, they call it lifestyle design. You can create a business in a way that will allow you to do that. Instead of just working for when you're 65, you can have your goals now and sort of create and develop a lifestyle around those more shorter term goals, or what would make you happy now.
Yeah, no, that's, I agree. That's one of those things that, you talk about being laid off as a blessing, in the sense that it forced you into action. And I think, so many people kind of coast through life and they don't really take that long-term view until maybe things are a little bit too late. And so I think if we can, with interviews like this, get people to take action, it's all the better. And I know part of your mission on your website and with your blog, your podcast, is to get people to take action now. Don't wait until somebody's telling you that you've been laid off to start thinking about creating another lifestyle or career for yourself. Mm. The other thing I wanted to touch on here, and I've never heard anybody discuss this with you, but the LEED exam, I know you passed that in particular and set up that site because you were trying to move up in the architectural firm that you were working at. But is being green an important thing to you, and is that something that you that you go about in your life?
Yeah, it is. It really is. I mean, I do the basic things like, make sure I recycle and do all that stuff. But I encourage that behavior to through example. And also, now that I have the opportunity to do things like buy a house and I have this extra money, I've been able to, invest in that part of my life too. And also, for instance, we just bought this home. We made sure, and it was a big sort of goal for me to have solar panels on the house. And make sure that I had the best insulation, and because it would save for heating bills and all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, I do care about that stuff. It is something that I worry about. Obviously, I took that test not just to climb the corporate ladder, but because that was something that was interesting to me, and I thought that perhaps down the road I would maybe, even specialize in that as an architect. Coming from Berkeley, that's something that, a lot of us at Berkeley care about and have as part of our, characteristics and sort of reflect that in what we do or what our decisions that we make in life. So yeah, it is something that is important to me. And I still, even though I don't have, I don't have a practice that builds our buildings that are that are sustainable and environmentally friendly. I feel like I'm able to contribute not only through what I do in my personal life, but I still have that site, and it teaches people how to become people who help companies understand this sort of green industry. So in a way, I still am contributing, maybe in a different way, but I still feel like I do have some sort of footprint in the world of green.
That's really good. Yeah, I hadn't looked at it from that perspective, but that's absolutely right. I mean, how many people have passed that exam now, in large part because of the website?
Yeah, thousands.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's fantastic. Yeah. I want to ask this one last question, and I think it's probably one you get all the time from people. But it's basically, what would you tell somebody out there, who maybe, they have a job, but they're in debt. Maybe they have student loans or credit card debt or auto debt or all of those things, but they have this dream that they want to do something different. What kind of advice would you give them about where to start and kind of what to do?
Sure. I mean, my very first piece of advice, specifically for those who are in debt, is to create a plan to get out. That is a crutch. And I think that will hold you back from a lot of things and a lot of amazing things you could do to add value to this world. Now, that doesn't mean you should absolutely wait until you're at zero in order to start something. I mean, obviously, you should start thinking about that now, and it's something that you could work towards. And again, you just get started, and you can start small. You don't have to spend a ton of money to give yourself a chance to make something happen. And also remember that it's about serving a particular audience and finding a niche. And this can be something that you're interested in or that you want to be interested in, that you feel you have something new to bring to the table, and deliver for that audience. Because for me, it's really my business model, my formula is, your earnings are a byproduct of how helpful you serve your audience. And so understanding who that audience is, then understanding what they need and being able to provide that for them. That's the formula. And so you don't need to be debt free in order to do that. But being debt free will allow you to take more risks, that will allow you to, spread your message even further to make more things happen for you and your audience down the road.
Perfect. Yeah, absolutely. Getting more margin in your life, right?
Yeah,
absolutely. Okay, well, Pat, really, I appreciate so much your time on the show today. I know that there's been a lot of good information, and I know the folks who follow you may not have heard some aspects of your life from this perspective, and I hope that will inspire them to examine their own lives and become more frugal and more fiscally focused, and be a little bit more concerned about the drain on their finances and not as much about how much more they can make.
Sure. I think for me, the biggest thing that I do, and I still do this, is before I make any purchase, I just ask myself, is this something that I really need right now? And a lot of times that will stop me from spending money where I don't really need to spend it on.
Right. That's a great question, and that's a great piece to finish on here. To contact Pat, you can reach him on Twitter at Pat Flynn, or you can go to his website, patflynn.com, where you can learn more about his book, Let Go, his podcast, Smart Passive Income, and his blog of the same name. There are also links to his many social media sites. So with that, I'm let people know here that all the information that's been in this podcast, all the information that Pat has laid out here will be found in the show notes at cashcarconvert.com, and that'll be episode 2 of the podcast. And for those of you, if you would please, if you like this podcast, please go out to iTunes and provide a rating and a comment. And I'm not asking for a 5-star rating unless you think this podcast it deserves it. But I would love your feedback either way. I want to try to improve and make this podcast better. I believe I can do that. And I think the message I'm delivering here is important to help people find their way out of debt. And I believe Cash Cars is a good place to start. So I appreciate your time, and thank you so much for listening. Hello and welcome back. So we're going to wrap up this episode now. And to do that, I want to start by thanking Pat again for being on. I thought he was a wonderful guest, really insightful comments and insight into where his head was when he was going through what started out to look like a dark time, but what really turned out to be quite a blessing for him. So really some good information there. To that end, I want to point out what I thought were some of the top takeaways from the interview. And I'm going to start by saying that I thought Pat having an emergency fund was a really key item there. With 70% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck, to have an emergency fund, to have something that gives you some additional margin in your life is just a really key item. And I don't really have the actual numbers at hand, but I've heard that people tend to, about every 5 years, have some type of a major life event. And that can be a death, a divorce, a layoff, some type of large medical issue or major medical issue. So, we kind of float along thinking we can afford something based on the payments, and we kind of make this assumption that our life will remain constant, that our job won't be in jeopardy, and that we won't have anything negative happen to us. And the reality is most people have something like that happen to them about every 5 years. So get an emergency fund, be prepared, give yourself some margin in your life. If you have questions about how to do that, I would personally recommend going to Dave Ramsey's site, which is daveramsey.com, and I'll link up to that in the show notes so you'll know how to find that. The second takeaway that I thought was really good with Pat's interview is that Pat invested in himself. He didn't invest in things. He was investing in his life. So when he went from making $38,000 a year to $60,000 a year, he didn't go out and buy a car. He didn't go in debt. He didn't go refresh his wardrobe or his jewelry, watches, sunglasses, etc. And so when he, was faced with the layoff, he had invested in himself, and therefore, again, things like his emergency fund, things like the stock market. So again, he had more margin in his life than most Americans do. So as devastating as that as that meeting was where he was notified, and as much of a punch in the gut as it must have been, he was in a much better position than most Americans are to handle that kind of conversation. So again, going back to the first item, make sure you have an emergency fund. And to do that, you have to invest in yourself and not things. So those two takeaways kind of work together. The third one kind of works in there as well, and that is educate yourself on finances and money. Pat pointed out in the interview that he had read Dave Ramsey's work, that he was familiar with many of the blogs that have to do with frugality living, simple living, and I think that's something that kind of gets overlooked. We tell people to take care of their money, to get emergency funds, invest in the stock market, but we don't always tell them to get an education on that. And I certainly would say that you should look for a good financial advisor as a way to help you with that. But even to have a reasonable discussion with a financial advisor, you need to have some education yourself. So there's lots of frugality blogs out on the web. Go out there and take a look around. Find one that's voice resonates with yours, and start to participate in that and read and see what you can get out of that. See if you can glean some information that might help you get a better understanding of money and how it works, and why you want to set yourself up to not be one of the 70% of Americans living paycheck to paycheck. The fourth thing that I thought Pat raised that was a really good item was that he brought up the fact that he joined the Internet Business Mastery Academy, and that was another investment in himself, right? He was paying $97 a month to participate in that group. But the takeaway from that for me was really that he said the biggest benefit was really finding like-minded individuals to be accountability partners and to support him in his efforts. So he was talking about that from a business perspective, but I think that's something that can really be taken in a lot of areas of life, and many other areas. And the one that I think could be helpful here is the area of debt. So if you have a lot of debt in your life, I would say try to find some groups that are out there that would allow you to find some like-minded people who are trying to get out of debt just like you, and be inspiration for each other, be accountability partners for each other, and I think that'll go a long way to helping you move forward there. One of the classes I know that kind of helps with this is Dave Ramsey has a Financial Peace University class. It's offered through a lot of local churches, and so I can recommend that. Beyond that, I would say look locally to see what's out there in your area. Maybe there may be other offerings from local churches or other community types of organizations. So check those out. See if you can find some like-minded individuals to help you work through your debt, and you can help them work through theirs at the same time. Now to wrap up the show, I'm going to let you know that I'm going to have everything out in the show notes for this episode, so you can find all the information that was discussed in this episode in the show notes. And I would ask you to go out there and in the comments, let me know what you thought about the interview. What were your biggest takeaways from the conversation with Pat? And also, about this podcast. What did you like about it? What could be improved? What did you think of the format? I also have a what's known as a speak pipe on the right side of my website, and you can also go out there and leave me a voicemail message. So I would encourage you to do that as well. But either way, give me your feedback and let me know what you think. And again, you can find the show notes at cashcarconvert.com. Again, that's cashcarconvert.com. Lastly, I'll again ask you to go out to iTunes, subscribe to the podcast, leave me a rating and a review. A good, honest, candid rating and review would be greatly appreciated. It'll give me an opportunity to improve this podcast. I want listener feedback. This show is really for you. I want to help you with where you are. And to do that, I need feedback about where you are. I have my ideas about where a lot of Americans are based on what I've been able to read in many financial newspapers and magazines and online resources. But I think there's nothing better than actually hearing from the people directly. So please, whether it's on my website or in iTunes, leave me comments about where you are, what you want to hear in the show, and how I can improve it. With that, I thank you so much for taking the time to listen. I know that there are so many podcasts out there, and I appreciate you taking the time to listen to this one. Until the next episode, take care.